Welcome to Lawyerpreneur, where we discuss the alternate paths that allow lawyers to engage their entrepreneurialism and distinguish themselves from others, because being a lawyer doesn't have to mean doing business as usual. I'm your host, Jeremy Richter. Today's episode is brought to you by Alps Insurance, the nation's largest direct writer of lawyers' malpractice insurance. Founded for lawyers by lawyers over 30 years ago, Alps works directly with your firm. No broker or agent, and if you do have a claim, the Alps claims handling team is comprised of actual attorneys, all with private experience. Alps roots for the law firms they protect. They believe in your success and nurture your endeavors with industry-leading coverage, risk management resources, and accredited CLEs, offering practical advice for pioneering lawyers like you. And Alps has the slickest online application out there. Qualifying firms can apply, see rates, and bind coverage in about 20 minutes. Right now, you can get 25% off one CLE seminar from Alps. Go to alpsinsurance.com/CLE. That's ALPS insurance.com/CLE and use the promo code Lawyerpreneur upon checkout. In addition to the corporate sponsorship that helps pay for the hosting and transcription of the show, you can support Lawyerpreneur on Patreon at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. For less than the cost of a 0.1, you can help pay for the time it takes in creating and editing Lawyerpreneur and receive copies of my two most recent books, Stop Putting Out Fires and Level Up Your Law Practice. Now, on to the interview. So I have to start this episode with admitting that I totally chickened out yesterday. This is the episode that I had planned to record. This is the episode that I sat down to record, but it has the potential to be personal, and I am pretty uncomfortable with that. And so I chickened out and recorded the episode from yesterday where I gave you updates on all the things that I'm working on. And that's something that I had been wanting to do, but it's not what I had actually intended to do in that moment. And so it felt a little bit disingenuous. And here I am now to record this one about relationships and the importance of relationships in lawyering, in business, in our everyday lives. And what catalyzed this topic is that last week, one of my partners, the lawyer who was my first mentor as a lawyer and who I was hired to work with at Webster Henry when they first hired me 8 years ago, he's been fighting pancreatic cancer for a while now. We got news that he's doing very poorly, and so some of us went and visited him last week, essentially saying goodbye, having our last conversation with him. And in that conversation, he and I spoke our appreciation to each other, and that was a very difficult thing, and it got me thinking a lot about relationships, and especially when I've talked to several of his clients over the last couple of months and gave them updates on him, and they would tell me we've been working with him for 20, 25 years, and he was so much more than a litigation partner who handled our cases. He was someone who was invested in our personal relationships. He went hunting with them. He was someone that they would call for advice on cases that they may never send to him, that may never go into litigation. And he's the person who taught me how to navigate those relationships and build relationships in a way that are more than just, I handle your cases and bill you for them, and, we exchange time and money. He taught me the importance of having personal relationships with your business partners. And I have talked about this in this podcast with episodes with MC Sangaila and with Stephen Embry, particularly in the last 6 months during the pandemic. the personal side of the business relationships has become so much more evident for me, particularly in the absence of face-to-face meetings and in the absence of personal conversations that people are not having an opportunity to have, that being personable in business is so much more important now, because there are people who, if they don't live with family, if they don't have roommates, may not have much opportunity outside of a business setting to talk about personal things and their experiences and what's happening and how they're dealing with it. Last week, I talked to a client on my way home from a deposition. I just called to give a brief update about a case, and we ended up talking for 45 or 50 minutes. And about 3 of those minutes were related to the actual case I called to talk about. And we talked about politics and football and some of that stuff you have to be really careful with. But we'd known each other for years and we're comfortable having that conversation. We're people who were comfortable having disparate ideas and sharing discourse about that. But it was obvious to me in that moment that both of us had things we wanted to talk about and have pretty limited availability for audiences right now. Another thing that my lawyering mentor taught me was the importance of investing in others and putting them in a position to succeed. And this is something that took a couple of different forms with us. He was very busy when I got hired in 2012 and didn't have a ton of time to sit down and go through everything. And so it was a lot of me getting thrown right into the fire and seeing what happens, which I'm a pretty internally motivated person. I would much rather be given that opportunity than sit in an office doing paperwork for 4 years before I get a chance to sit in a deposition. So that worked out really well for me. I mean, we took our lumps in some things, but overall, it turned out to be a fairly good experience for both of us. And so he put me in opportunities both to succeed and to fail as I learned how to be a litigator. And then, even more importantly for my long-term development, he put me in positions to succeed with clients, both his existing clients, who he allowed me to interact with, have phone calls, emails, where there are other lawyers I know in insurance defense firms, in civil defense firms across the country, where they refuse to allow their associates to have direct contact with their clients and instead hoard those clients and hoard that communication out of fear that that associate may one day develop a better relationship and steal that client from them. We've talked before on this podcast about the difference between a scarcity mindset, which what I just described evidence is, an abundance mindset, which is the idea that there's always more where that came from, and operating out of a place of generosity, which is what he exhibited with me in allowing me to develop my own relationships with these clients so that both he and I could serve them better over the course of years and over the course of a career of work. And he also would take me with him on marketing trips and show me. Now, he was an extroverted person, which I am not. And so he was a person that was very magnetic. And when he would go into a room, he would draw crowds with stories and with just knowing everybody in the room and being extremely personable and engaging. And I got to see that side of marketing, and it allowed me to understand that that's a way to market that really works well for some people, but does not work well for me. And so as I came to that realization, I realized that I needed to learn how to market in other ways that were sustainable over a long period of time. And he gave me the freedom and the leeway to develop that and gain my own foothold in marketing and do it in a way that worked for me. He used his platform and his relationships as leverage to help pull me up to another level, rather than what I see a lot of people doing, using their platform as a means of pushing others down and holding them back from developing and from being able to create new opportunities for themselves. I posted a tweet the other day about the same idea. I had seen on Twitter where Harlan Coben, the thriller writer, is someone who is very frequently promoting other authors' books, and it's always authors who are not as well known as he is. And then I was listening to an interview with David Baldacci, who expressed the same idea that as a writer, one of his jobs is to promote other writers and promote reading so that other writers can be successful and maybe even as successful as he is. But both of those guys use their platforms to reach down and pull others up, to give them opportunities, expose them to people and experiences that might not otherwise be the case. And that's what we have to do. Whether it's we as businessmen and women, we as lawyers, partners in our firms, we have to give others opportunities, whether it's opportunities that we were given by those who came before us, or in some cases that we were closed off from having opportunities and saw the effect that that had on us. We have to, once we have a platform and have established ourselves, use that to aid others and to pay it forward, rather than to oppress and rather than to keep them, those people who are coming behind us, from having opportunities. This is a relationship business. All of our client-facing businesses are relationship businesses, both with those whom we work with in the office every day, the clients that we serve. All of this is built on a foundation of relationships, and sometimes that's a hard thing to recognize and to want to be the case, particularly for people like me, who you may be just as well sitting in a room interacting with very few people every day, but that's not the way forward. The way forward is by incorporating personality and personal relationships into the business of being a lawyer, into our other businesses, so that we can expand our community and our reach, and to help us to give others the same opportunities that we have by using the platforms that we've developed. Thanks for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please take time to rate and subscribe at whatever podcatcher you're listening on. And if you want more from me, you can find me at jeremywrichter.com. You can also find me on Twitter at RichterJW. And if you want the extra audio and benefits available at Patreon, you can become a patron at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. Thanks for listening.